My name is Hannah. I am 25 years old now. But the night my life finally broke into two distinct pieces, I was only 17. I was standing at the end of our polished oak dining table in the suburbs of Chicago. I was trying to make myself as invisible as the extra salad fork no one ever used. My mother, Deborah, had decided to throw a milestone celebration dinner. The house was buzzing with adults in designer clothes. They held tall crystal glasses filled with expensive wine. They talked about investments and summer homes in the Hamptons. My job that night was to refill the wine glasses and clear the dirty plates like a servant. The air in the room smelled like expensive perfume and roast beef. My mother moved through the room like a queen in her court. She kissed cheeks. She laughed too loudly at bad jokes. She was always one drink away from being mean. My father, Richard, stood near the head of the table. He kept checking his watch and smiling at every compliment about his business. They were performing success. I was the only misprint in their perfect brochure. Halfway through dessert, my mother clinked her spoon against her crystal wine glass. The sharp sound cut through the chatter. The room went quiet. She stood right behind my chair. Her fingers rested on my shoulders. It felt less like a hug and more like claws digging into my skin. "I just have to show you all our pride and joy," she announced. My stomach tightened. She gestured to my brother Jacob, who was sitting across from me. He was 20 years old and had just failed another semester of community college. "This is our son Jacob," she said. "Our hope, our future." Then she paused. She let the silence build. She looked down at me with a smile that did not reach her eyes. "And this is our daughter," she said. "Our family mistake. The 1% accident we wish we could write off on our taxes." For a second, no one moved. Then a man named Mr. Miller let out a loud laugh. He was my father's biggest business partner. He leaned back in his chair with grease on his chin. He looked at me with pure amusement. "Well, at least this accident knows how to clean a plate," he said. The whole room erupted. It was not just a chuckle. It was a roar. My father, Richard, raised his glass high in the air. He looked me right in the eye. "To silver linings." He toasted. I felt my heart pounding in my ears. It was louder than their laughter. I looked at the red wine ring stained on the tablecloth. I looked at the half-eaten steak on Mr. Miller's plate. I realized this was not a joke. This was exactly who they were. I did not cry. I balled up the dirty linen napkin in my hand. I dropped it right into the center of Mr. Miller's plate. Sauce splattered onto his expensive silk tie. The laughter died instantly. My mother dug her nails deeper into my shoulder. I stood up and shrugged her off. I looked at my father. "Congratulations," I said. My voice was steady. "You just lost the only child who actually gave a damn about this family." I turned around and walked out of the dining room. I walked up the stairs past the framed photos where I was always blurry in the background. I went into my room. I did not slam the door. I moved fast. I grabbed my old backpack. I stuffed in 3 shirts, a pair of jeans, my sketchbook. I opened the shoebox under my bed and took out the cash I had been hiding, $42. That was it. That was the price of my freedom. When I reached the bottom of the stairs, my mother was waiting. She stood in front of the heavy front door. Her face was twisted in annoyance. She was not sad. She was worried about the guests hearing a scene. "You are not taking anything I paid for," she hissed. "Phone, car keys, house key. Give them to me." I reached into my pocket. I pulled out my iPhone. I unhooked the car key and the house key from the ring. I held them out. She reached for them, but I did not hand them to her. I let them drop. The heavy metal keys hit the floor hard. They gouged a deep white scratch into the perfect dark polish of the hardwood floor. "Keep them," I said. I opened the door. The cold night air hit me like a slap. I stepped out into the darkness. I had $42. I had a backpack. I had absolutely nothing else. As the heavy door slammed shut behind me, I could still hear the sound of laughter starting up again inside. The walk to the bus station took an hour. My fancy dress shoes blistered my heels with every step. When I finally saw the concrete platform under the flickering yellow street lamp, my heart sank. The schedule on the wall was clear. The last bus had left 20 minutes ago. The station was locked. I was stranded. I checked my pockets out of habit and then remembered. No phone, no way to call a friend, no map, just $42 and the clothes on my back. The temperature was dropping fast. I found a small public park a few blocks away. It was not safe, but it was hidden. I curled up on a wooden bench under a large oak tree. I pulled my knees to my chest and wrapped my arms around my backpack like it was a life preserver. The cold seeped into my bones. Around 2 a.m, I heard them. Heavy footsteps on the gravel path, slurred laughter. A group of 3 men stumbled into the park. They were passing a bottle between them. One of them spotted my white dress shirt glowing in the moonlight. "Hey," he shouted, "look what we have here, a little lost sheep." Terror spiked in my chest. I did not wait to hear the rest. I rolled off the bench and scrambled on my hands and knees into the thick, overgrown bushes behind me. The branches scratched my face and tore my stockings. I pressed myself into the dirt. I held my breath. My hand closed around a large, jagged rock. I gripped it so hard my knuckles turned white. If they touched me, I would smash it into their faces. They lingered by the bench for a few minutes, kicking at the wood and calling out crude names. Eventually, they got bored and wandered off. I stayed in the dirt for hours, shivering violently. But in that darkness, I realized something profound. Those men were predators, but they were honest predators. They wanted to hurt me, and they showed it. My parents were worse. They smiled and called me family while they slowly bled my spirit dry. The world outside was cruel, but at least it was not a lie. When the sun finally rose, I was stiff and covered in mud. I walked back to the station. I used almost all my cash to buy a one-way ticket to the nearest big city. As the bus pulled away, I did not look back at the skyline. I was done with the suburbs. I was done with the lies. I was 17 years old, and I was finally free. The city was a concrete maze that chewed people up and spit them out. I had $7 left in my pocket. I walked from storefront to storefront asking for work. The answers were always the same. Get lost. You look homeless. Come back when you are 18. By noon, my stomach was clawing at my ribs. I stood in front of a place called Mike's Diner. The windows were coated in a thin layer of grease. The sign flickered with a dying neon hum. It looked desperate. That meant it was perfect. I pushed the door open. The smell of burnt bacon and stale coffee hit me instantly. A man stood behind the counter. He was huge with forearms the size of tree trunks. This was Mike. He took one look at my dirty dress and my oversized backpack. "We are not a shelter," he growled. "Buy something or get out." I walked right up to the counter. My hands were shaking, but I hid them behind my back. "I am not looking for a handout," I said. "I am looking for a trade. Look at your floor. It is understaffed. Your waitress is drowning." Mike narrowed his eyes. "So what?" "Give me 2 hours," I said. "The lunch rush. I will work for free. If I break a single plate or get one order wrong, I will walk out that door and never come back. But if I survive, you hire me." He laughed. It was a dry, mean sound. "You look like you would snap in a stiff breeze." But he waved a hand at the chaos. "Go ahead. 2 hours?" It was absolute hell. The kitchen was a war zone. The chef screamed insults that would make a sailor blush. Customers yelled for refills and ketchup. My feet screamed in my cheap shoes. Blisters formed and popped. But here is the thing about growing up with Deborah. I was trained for this. I had spent years serving wine to rich people who treated me like furniture. I knew how to be invisible and efficient. I carried 4 plates at a time. I memorized orders instantly. I cleaned tables before the customers even fully stood up. When the clock hit 2, the rush died down. I stood panting by the dish pit. Mike walked over. He did not smile. He tossed a white apron at my chest. "Be here at 6 tomorrow," he grunted. Then he slid a plate of hot, greasy fries across the counter. I ate them with my bare hands. The salt burned my cracked lips. It was the best meal of my life. That night, I did not have money for a room. Mike let me sleep in the dry storage closet on a pile of flour sacks. It was cold and dusty, but for the first time in my life, I slept soundly. I was not a mistake anymore. I was an employee. For the next 3 months, I existed in a blur of grease and exhaustion. I worked 14 hours a day. My hands smelled permanently of bleach and old frying oil. The only time I felt human was during the slow hours between shifts. I would sit in the corner booth with a stack of cheap napkins and a ballpoint pen. I sketched furious designs, sharp lines, aggressive silhouettes. I took the torn red gingham tablecloths Mike was going to throw away. I used the diner sewing kit to stitch them into intricate patterns on my apron. It was not just mending, it was armor. I was trying to sew myself back together using the scraps of a life I had left behind. One Tuesday night, the door swung open. Roxy walked in. Roxy was a drag queen who performed at the club across the street. She was 6 feet tall in heels, with a wig the color of toxic waste. She sat at the counter and watched me wipe down the grill. Her eyes landed on my apron. She leaned forward. "Did you do that stitching yourself, Sugar?" she asked. Her voice was like gravel wrapped in velvet. I nodded. I was afraid Mike would yell at me for wasting time. "It is nice," she said. "It looks expensive." 2 nights later, Roxy burst through the door. She was not walking. She was running. She was clutching a bundle of silver sequins to her chest. Her face was pale beneath the heavy makeup. "I need help," she gasped. "My zipper busted. I go on stage in 20 minutes. If I do not have a costume, I do not get paid." I looked at the dress. It was a disaster. The zipper was shredded. The fabric was tearing. Mike started to shout that this was a place of business. I held up a hand. "Sit down," I ordered. I did not just fix it. I destroyed it to save it. I ripped the rest of the zipper out. I used a handful of safety pins and a strip of black cloth from a busboy apron. I pulled the fabric tight and pinned it in a chaotic, aggressive pattern. It looked intentional. It looked punk. It looked like survival. Roxy stood up and spun around. The silver sequins caught the diner lights. It was magnificent. She made her show. An hour later, she came back. She slapped a crisp bill onto the counter. $100. It was more money than I made in 3 days of tips. "Keep it," she said, "and listen to me, Sugar." She grabbed my hands. Her palms were warm. "These hands are not meant for carrying chicken soup. You are wasting your magic in this grease pit. It took me 6 months to save $2,000. I kept every single bill in a coffee can under the flour sacks in the storage closet." Mike wrote me a letter of recommendation. It was short and written in sloppy handwriting on the back of a menu, but it was honest. That letter, combined with my portfolio, got me a partial scholarship to the City Community College Design Program. I walked into the orientation hall feeling like an imposter. The room was filled with the children of dentists and lawyers. They wore cashmere and carried leather bags. I wore my diner uniform under a thrifted coat. That was where I met Ashley. She was sitting in the front row. She had perfectly blow-dried blonde hair and eyes that scanned people for their net worth. She looked exactly like a younger version of my mother, Deborah. It made my stomach turn. She spotted my scuffed boots immediately. She leaned over to the girl next to her and whispered loud enough for me to hear. I did not know they let the help sit with the students. Ashley made it her personal mission to remind me of my place. She called me the kitchen rat. She mocked the smell of frying oil that clung to my hair. But the worst moment happened 3 weeks into the semester. I had spent 40 hours working on a charcoal sketch for the midterm. It was intricate and dark. I laid it out on the studio table. Ashley walked by holding a large iced coffee. She did not trip. She simply tipped her wrist. The brown liquid splashed across my drawing. It soaked into the expensive paper and ruined the face of my design. "Oops," she said. Her voice was flat and cruel. "Honestly, it is an improvement. It covers up your cheap technique." The old Hannah would have cried. The new Hannah felt a cold, hard rage settle in her chest. I did not scream. I stared at her until she looked away. I grabbed a rag to salvage the table. Suddenly, another hand appeared. It was Jessica. She was a girl with messy dark curls and paint under her fingernails. She wore flannel and looked just as tired as I felt. She threw a roll of paper towels down. "Ignore the plastic princess," she muttered. "We can fix this. I have extra paper." We stayed up all night in the studio redrawing my concept from memory. Jessica shared her instant noodles with me. We worked until our fingers cramped and our eyes burned. Watching her shade in the lines beside me, I realized something profound. My parents shared my blood, but they would have let me drown. Jessica was a stranger, but she handed me a life raft. Family is not biology. Family is the person who jumps into the trench and fights beside you when the world tries to bury you. The final year showcase was the Coliseum. The grand prize was a $20,000 grant and an internship in Paris. It was my ticket out of poverty. Ashley knew this. She unveiled her collection first. It was a line of flawless silk evening gowns. They were perfect. They were also impossible. No student could stitch invisible hems like that. Everyone whispered that her father had hired a professional seamstress in Italy to sew them for her. But the professors were blinded by the shine of the money. Ashley walked past my station and sneered. "It is a shame they do not give prizes for effort," she said. "You really look like you struggled." I looked at my materials. I had no budget for silk or satin. I had $12 left in my bank account. I closed my eyes and heard my father's voice. The family mistake. The accident. I opened my eyes and grabbed a pair of heavy shears. I decided to stop fighting the label. If I was a mistake, I would be the most magnificent mistake they had ever seen. I went to the alley behind the diner. I dragged in rough burlap coffee sacks. I went to the junkyard and found rusted washers and wire. I did not hide the seams. I exposed them. I used thick red thread to stitch the burlap together like closing a wound. I slashed the fabric and pinned it back together with metal. I called the collection The Mistake. When my models walked the runway, the room went silent. It did not look like pretty clothes. It looked like armor for the broken. It was aggressive and raw and undeniably real. The head judge stood up. She touched the rough texture of a jacket made from discarded canvas. "This is not just fashion," she said. "This is a story." They announced the winner 5 minutes later. It was not the silk. It was the burlap. Ashley screamed that the judging was rigged and stormed out. I stood on that stage and held the giant check. I finally knew my worth. 8 years have passed since that night. I am 25 years old now. I am sitting in a corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline. I am not hungry anymore. I am the owner of a global fashion brand. I named it 1%. It is a nod to the insult that started it all. I am famous. I am wealthy. And for the first time in my life, I am completely free. Success works like a magnet. Even though I was thousands of miles away, whispers from my hometown found their way to my inbox. The news was catastrophic. My father Richard had finally destroyed his own empire. He had always believed he was a genius investor. That arrogance led him to dump their liquid assets into a volatile tech startup that turned out to be a massive fraud. The company collapsed overnight. He was not just broke, he was drowning in lawsuits and debt. My mother Deborah handled the shame the only way she knew how. She bought things. She became addicted to online shopping to fill the void where her soul should have been. She maxed out every credit card ordering designer handbags she had nowhere to wear and crystal vases she could not afford to put flowers in. The neighbors whispered that the delivery trucks came every single day while the utility companies came to shut off the water. Then there was Jacob. My brother had never been told no in his entire life. When the family money dried up, he turned to online gambling. He was chasing a big win to save his lifestyle. Instead, he dug a hole $50,000 deep with loan sharks who did not care about his last name. But the final blow came from an unexpected source. One Tuesday morning, my phone exploded with notifications. A video was trending on every social media platform. The title was horrifyingly simple. Wealthy family humiliates their own daughter. I watched the footage. It was shaky and grainy. It had been filmed from a cell phone 8 years ago. It was the dinner party. I saw my younger self standing humiliated at the table. I heard the voice of my mother clear as a bell calling me a mistake. I heard my father laugh. I heard the room roar with cruelty. It was posted by an account linked to Ashley. She had filmed it years ago to make fun of me. She likely reposted it now thinking it would shame me again, or perhaps she just wanted attention for herself. It backfired spectacularly. The internet did not laugh at me this time. They raged at my parents. Millions of strangers dissected their cruelty. They tracked down the bankrupt business of my father and left thousands of one-star reviews. They identified my mother and flooded her social media with comments calling her a monster. They had spent their entire lives curating a perfect image. In 24 hours, the internet stripped them naked and left them with nothing but their shame. They were social pariahs. And for the first time in 8 years, I smiled at a video of my family. It was 3 in the morning when the call came. The name Jacob flashed on the screen of my phone. I hesitated. The last time we spoke, he called me a loser who would never amount to anything. I slid my thumb across the screen. I expected arrogance. I heard terror. "Hannah, please," he sobbed. His voice was trembling like a frightened child. "They are taking the house. The bank is coming on Monday. Dad had a stroke last week. Mom has locked herself in the master bedroom. You have to come back. We have no one else. I did not transfer funds. I did not offer empty words of comfort." I hung up the phone. I put on my cashmere coat and walked down to the garage. I slid into the leather seat of my black Porsche 911. I drove 6 hours straight through the darkness. I wanted them to see exactly who I had become. I pulled into the driveway just as the sun began to bleed through the gray clouds. The sight of the house stopped me cold. The manicured lawn I used to mow was now a jungle of waist-high weeds. The pristine white columns were gray and peeling like dead skin. A foreclosure notice was taped to the front door. It fluttered in the wind like a flag of surrender. I pushed the door open. The silence inside was heavy and suffocating. The air used to smell of expensive French perfume and fresh lilies. Now it smelled of wet cardboard and mildew. The house was pitch black. The power had clearly been cut days ago. I navigated by the light of the open door. I found them in the living room sitting on the expensive Italian sofa that was now stained and dusty. My father Richard looked skeletal. One side of his face drooped slightly from the stroke. Jacob sat on the floor with his head in his hands. But it was Deborah who moved first. She squinted at me through the gloom. Her hair was matted and her eyes were wild. But when she saw me standing there, the old venom returned instantly. She let out a dry cackle. "Well, look who finally found her way home," she said. Her voice was raspy, but dripping with the old arrogance. "I told your father you would fail eventually. I knew you would come crawling back here to beg for food." I let out a short, incredulous laugh that echoed off the bare walls. I reached into my leather tote bag and pulled out the current issue of Forbes magazine. My face was on the cover. I was wearing a sharp red suit and looking powerful under the bold headline, 30 Under 30. I tossed it onto the dusty coffee table. It landed with a heavy thud right next to a pile of unpaid utility bills. "I am not here to beg," I said. My voice was ice cold. "I am not the one who is starving in the dark. I came here to see exactly how you intended to spin this disaster." My father Richard shifted on the sofa. He tried to sit up straighter despite the slump in his left shoulder. He looked at the magazine and then at me. His eyes were not filled with pride. They were filled with calculation. "Hannah, listen to me," he said. His speech was slightly slurred, but his tone was just as manipulative as I remembered. "We were hard on you for a reason. We saw your potential. We knew you needed a push. Look at you now. You are successful because of us, because of that night. We gave you the gift of resilience. Now you have a responsibility to use that success to save this family." The audacity took my breath away. He was trying to rebrand 8 years of neglect as a parenting strategy. I felt a hot flare of rage in my chest, but I kept my face smooth. "Responsibility." I repeated the word like it tasted rotten. I pointed a manicured finger at Jacob. My brother was huddled in the corner wearing dirty sweatpants. He refused to look me in the eye. "Is that your version of success? You gave him everything. You protected him from every consequence. You coddled him until he turned into a useless phantom who gambles away money he does not have. Look at him. He is a ruin because you never let him struggle." I reached into my bag again. This time, I pulled out a thick manila envelope. I dumped the contents onto the table. It was a stack of documents my private investigator had compiled over the last 48 hours. "I know everything," I said. "I know about the fraudulent loans. I know about the offshore accounts that are empty. I know about the gambling debts Jacob owes to dangerous people. You do not just need a little help with the mortgage. You owe $2 million to creditors who are done waiting. And I know one more thing. This house is not just in pre-foreclosure. It goes up for public auction tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. The silence that followed my declaration was broken only by the sound of Deborah's sobbing. She lunged forward and grabbed my hand with cold, clammy fingers. "Hannah, please," she begged. "You cannot let us lose everything. Just write the check. You have so much money now. It is nothing to you. We are your family." I pulled my hand away, as if I had touched something rotting. I reached into my bag one last time. I pulled out a heavy leather binder. I slammed it onto the table with a sound that made Jacob flinch. "I am not going to pay your debts," I said. "I am going to buy them. I have arranged to purchase your distressed loans from the creditors. That means you do not owe the bank anymore. You owe me, and I always collect on my investments." I flipped the binder open to the first page, but my mercy comes with conditions. Here are the terms. First, you will open your precious family Facebook account, the one with 5,000 followers where you pretend to be perfect. You will start a live stream. You will read this statement word for word. I pointed to a typed script clipped to the document. It says, "We are failures who abused our daughter to feed our own egos. We are frauds." Deborah gasped. "I cannot do that. It will destroy our reputation." I ignored her. Second, Jacob goes to an inpatient rehab facility in Nevada tomorrow morning. If he leaves early, he goes to jail for fraud. Third, you and Dad will get jobs, real jobs. No more consulting, no more schemes, manual labor. And fourth, you are legally forbidden from ever using my name again. If you tell one person I am your daughter to get a loan or a discount, I will foreclose on you instantly. Deborah screamed. She called me a monster. She called me an ungrateful brat who had forgotten where she came from. Richard looked at me with pure hatred. "You are enjoying this," he spat. "You are trying to humiliate us." I looked him dead in the eye. "I am just balancing the ledger." Just then a heavy knock echoed from the front door. I checked my diamond watch. "That is the lawyer representing the bank," I said. "He is here to serve the final eviction notice. You have 2 minutes. Sign the contract and live by my rules, or let him in and lose everything right now." Richard looked at the door and then at the paper. He picked up the pen. His hand shook so violently he could barely hold it. But he signed. Deborah followed. They had sold their souls to the devil they created. The county courthouse auction was a cold and sterile affair. It took place in a windowless room that smelled of stale coffee and bureaucratic desperation. I sat in the very back row wearing dark, oversized sunglasses. My black leather coat was buttoned to my chin. I watched my parents huddle together near the front. They looked small. Richard wore a suit that had not been pressed in weeks. Deborah kept wringing her hands and glancing at the door as if she expected a miracle to walk in and stop the proceedings. The auctioneer droned on in a monotone voice. He rattled off the legal description of the house. To the strangers in the room, it was just a parcel of land. To me, it was a museum of trauma. The bidding started at $400,000. It was a humiliatingly low number for a property they had boasted was worth millions. But the market knew the truth. The house was a hollow shell loaded with liens and bad memories. No one raised a hand. The silence stretched out. I lifted my paddle. 400,000, I said clearly. The auctioneer looked around. Going once, going twice. Sold to bidder number 42. My parents spun around. When they saw me, relief washed over their faces so intensely it looked painful. They rushed toward me before I could even sign the paperwork. Deborah was crying again, but this time she was smiling through the tears. She grabbed my arm with a desperate familiarity. "Oh, thank God, Hannah," she gushed. "We were so terrified. We thought a stranger was going to take it. I knew you would not let us lose our home." She looked at Richard. "See, Richard, I told you she was saving it for us. We can keep the master suite right, and you can stay in the guest wing whenever you visit. We will be a family again." The level of delusion was breathtaking. They truly believed that after everything I had done to dismantle their lies, I would simply hand them back the keys to their kingdom. I took off my sunglasses and looked at them with zero emotion. "You are confused," I said. My voice was calm and final. "I did not buy this house for you. I bought it for the Mistake Project." Richard blinked. His mouth hung open slightly. "What is that?" he asked. "It is my new non-profit organization," I explained. Starting next week, a construction crew is going to gut the interior. The marble floors are going. The crystal chandeliers are going to the dump. We are turning the entire estate into a shelter and vocational school for teenagers who have been kicked out by their families. It will be a place for the rejects, the disappointments, the mistakes. It will be filled with kids just like I was. Deborah went pale. Her hands trembled. "But," she stammered, "if it is a shelter, where will we live?" I reached into my pocket. I pulled out a single silver key attached to a plain plastic tag. I tossed it onto the wooden bench between us. It clattered loudly in the quiet room. "I rented you a one-bedroom apartment on the south side of town," I said. "It is small, and it smells like boiled cabbage, but it is clean. It is right next to the bus line, so you can get to your new jobs at the warehouse. I paid the first month of rent. After that, it is up to you. If you work hard, you will figure it out." Richard looked at the key like it was a grenade. "You cannot be serious," he whispered. "You expect us to live in a tenement while you turn our home into a halfway house. It is not your home anymore," I said. "It is my building, and unlike you, I am using it to build people up instead of tearing them down." I turned and walked out of the courthouse. I did not look back. An hour later, I drove my Porsche up the long, winding driveway of the estate one last time. A crew of workers was already there. A man in blue coveralls was standing on a ladder with a crowbar. He was prying the heavy brass letters of our family name off the stone pillar at the gate. I watched as the metal groaned and popped off. The first letter fell into the dirt with a dull thud, then the second, then the third. The name that had terrorized me for 17 years was being dismantled piece by piece. I waited for the anger to come. I waited for the sadness. But there was nothing. Just a vast, quiet relief. The war was over. I had won. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I knew by heart. It rang once. "Hey," Jessica answered. Her voice was warm and real. "It is finished," I said. "The sign is down." I could hear the smile in her voice. "About time. Mike is already firing up the grill at the diner. We made your favorite. Come home, Hannah." I put the car in gear. I looked at the empty stone pillar one last time, and then I drove away. I was going to the only place that mattered. Home. Blood connects you to a family, but it doesn't earn them the right to break you. I learned that forgiveness isn't about letting toxic people back into your heart. It's about letting go of the need for their approval. True family isn't found in a shared last name, but in the people who stand by you when you have nothing but a dream and a backpack. The best revenge isn't destroying those who hurt you. It's building a life so beautiful, full, and authentic that their absence becomes irrelevant. You are the architect of your own worth.